Arrival in the cold hits you before the door even opens. Not the sharp, clean cold of winter wind, but something older, heavier, stone cold. The kind that lives in walls built 200 years ago and has never, not once, left. It seeps through your wool cloak before you've taken 3 steps. It finds the gaps in your leather boots, crawls up your legs, settles into your bones like it's been waiting for you. November 1324, somewhere in the Yorkshire hills. And you're standing at the gates of a Benedictine monastery that looks less like a house of God and more like a fortress against the world. The abbey looms. That's the only word for it. Massive stone walls rise against a bruised gray sky, punctuated by narrow windows that look like suspicious eyes. The chapel tower stretches upward, its cross barely visible through the mist that clings to everything here. Around you, bare trees reach skeletal branches toward the clouds, and the ground is already hardening with the first real frost of the season. Your breath comes out in visible clouds. You pull your cloak tighter, but it does nothing. The cold here doesn't care about wool or leather or layers. It's patient. It knows it has all. Winter. You're a novice, new, untested. You arrived this morning after 3 days of walking from your village, where your family gave you their blessings and their fears in equal measure. Your mother cried. Your father nodded, stern and silent, and pressed a small wooden cross into your palm. Your sister asked if you'd ever come back. You didn't know how to answer. The truth is, you don't know why you're here. Not really. Maybe it's faith. Maybe it's fear of the world outside these walls, where war and disease and hunger wait with open mouths. Maybe it's the pull of something you can't name, a longing for silence, for order, for a life that makes sense when nothing else does. The gate creaks open, and a figure emerges from the shadows. Brother Thomas. He's older, maybe 50, with a lined face and eyes that have seen too many winters in places like this. His habit is gray wool, patched at the elbows, cinched with a simple rope belt. No decoration, no warmth. He looks at you without smiling, takes in your mud-splattered cloak, your nervous hands, your wide eyes. You're the new novice, he says. Not a question. His voice is flat, matter-of-fact, like he's identifying a sack of grain. You nod, he grunts. Follow me. Don't speak unless spoken to, and keep up. You follow him through the gate and into the cloister, and the world changes. Outside, there was at least the illusion of warmth, the memory of sun on your face from 3 days ago. Inside, there's only stone, gray stone walls rising on all 4 sides, forming a perfect square around a central courtyard garden, now stripped bare for winter. The walkway is covered, but the cold radiates from every surface. Your footsteps echo. Brother Thomas walks quickly, his sandaled feet making soft, slapping sounds against the flagstones. You try to match his pace, but your legs are tired from walking, and the cold is making you sluggish. He leads you through a narrow doorway and into a corridor so dim you nearly stumble. The only light comes from small, high windows that let in more cold than illumination. The walls press close on either side. You pass doors closed and silent, and you wonder what's behind them. Chapels, cells, storage rooms. No one tells you. Brother Thomas doesn't speak. The silence here is absolute, broken only by your footsteps and the distant, mournful toll of a bell. Once, twice, 3 times. You don't know what it means yet, but you'll learn. Everything here is governed by bells. This is the novice dormitory, Brother Thomas says, pushing open a heavy wooden door. You step inside and stop. The room is long and narrow, lined with simple wooden cots. Maybe 20 of them, each with a thin straw mattress, a single wool blanket, and nothing else. No curtains for privacy. No chests for belongings. Just beds in neat rows, like soldiers standing at attention. The walls are bare stone. The floor is bare stone. The ceiling is low, timbered with gaps that let in drafts. And the cold, oh, the cold is worse here than outside. It's concentrated, trapped, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. You'll sleep here, Brother Thomas says, pointing to a cot near the far wall. Third from the end. That's yours. Your belongings go under the bed. You'll be given a second blanket if the weather worsens, but don't expect it soon. We don't coddle novices. He looks at you, and for the first time, something almost like sympathy flickers in his eyes. You'll learn to sleep in the cold. Everyone does. Or they leave. You set down your small bundle, everything you own in the world, a spare shirt, a wooden cup, a comb, a prayer book your mother gave you. It looks painfully small under the cot. You sit on the edge of the mattress, and the straw crackles beneath you. It's lumpy, hard. You press your hand against it, and you can feel the wooden slats beneath. This is what you'll sleep on for the next year. Maybe longer, if you survive the trial period. Maybe forever. Brother Thomas is still watching. You'll rise at the second bell, 2 hours past midnight. That's matins. You'll attend prayers in the chapel, then return here until lauds at dawn. Prime follows, then terce, then work assignments. Meals are in the refectory at designated times. Silence is observed at all times, except during chapter meetings and with explicit permission from the abbot. Do you understand? You nod? You don't understand, not really, but you nod anyway because that's what's expected. Brother Thomas seems satisfied. Good. The others will show you the hand signals. You'll need them. We don't waste words here. He turns to leave, then pauses at the door. One more thing. The cold. It's worse than you think. Worse than anything you've known. It doesn't just chill you. It tests you. Your body, your mind, your faith. Some men break. Some men thrive. We'll see which you are. And then he's gone, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud that echoes in the empty dormitory. You're alone, completely, utterly alone. You sit on your cot and look around. The light from the high window is already fading, even though it can't be much past midday. The shadows lengthen. The cold presses closer. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and realize, with a jolt of something like panic, that this is your life now. This stone room, this hard bed, this crushing silence, this cold that never, ever leaves. You lie back on the mattress, staring up at the timber ceiling. Already you can see your breath misting in the air. Your fingers are stiff. Your toes are numb inside your boots. And you haven't even been here an hour. You think about your mother's kitchen, the fire crackling in the hearth, the smell of bread baking, the warmth that wrapped around you like love. You think about your sister laughing, your father's gruff voice, the life you left behind. It feels impossibly far away now, like a dream, like something that happened to someone else, But then, beneath the fear and the cold and the strangeness, you feel something else. Something quieter. A stillness. The world outside these walls is chaos. War between England and Scotland. Famine in the countryside. The plague that swept through your village 2 years ago, taking your brother and half the children you grew up with. Out there, life is loud and brutal and unpredictable. Here, in this cold stone room, there's order, structure, rules. The bells will ring at the same time every day. The prayers will be the same. The silence will hold you, whether you want it to or not. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you came here for. Not comfort, not warmth, but certainty. A life where you know, every single day, what comes next. If you're settling in for the night, go ahead and like this video if the algorithm brought you here. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been somewhere so cold you could see your breath indoors? Because that's where we're spending the winter. In a medieval monastery where warmth is a luxury and survival is a daily act of faith. It's not empty. There's the creak of timber settling, the whisper of wind through cracks in the stone, the distant, rhythmic sound of footsteps in another corridor, and beneath it all, a low hum you can't quite identify. Maybe it's the building itself, breathing. Maybe it's just your imagination, but it's there, constant and strange, and you realize you're going to have to learn to sleep with it. The door opens. You sit up quickly, heart pounding, as other novices begin to file in. Young men like you, dressed in the same gray habits, their faces pale and drawn. They don't speak. They don't even look at you. They move to their cots with practiced efficiency, kneeling briefly in prayer before sitting down to remove their sandals. You watch them, trying to learn the rhythm. One boy, maybe 16, catches your eye and gives you a small nod. Not a smile, just acknowledgement. You nod back, grateful for even that small connection. The light continues to fade. Someone lights a single candle near the door, but it does almost nothing to push back the darkness. The shadows grow longer, deeper, until you can barely see the faces of the other novices. They lie down, pulling their thin blankets over their habits. Some curl on their sides. Others lie flat on their backs, staring at the ceiling. No one speaks. The silence is so complete, you can hear your own heartbeat. You lie back down, fully clothed, your cloak still wrapped around you. The straw mattress crackles. The wool blanket scratches your chin. The cold seeps up through the wooden slats, through the straw, through your clothes, into your skin. You tuck your hands under your armpits, trying to trap what little warmth your body generates. Your feet ache with cold. Your nose feels like ice. And you think, with a clarity that's almost funny, I'm going to freeze to death on my first night. But you don't. Slowly, painfully, your body adjusts. Not warm, never warm, but something less than freezing. A state of numb endurance. You drift in and out of sleep, half aware of the other novices shifting on their cots, coughing softly, sighing. And then, somewhere in the deepest part of the night, a bell rings. Once, twice, 3 times. Clear and cold and insistent. The dormitory stirs. Bodies rise like ghosts in the darkness. You sit up, confused, disoriented. The boy who nodded at you earlier is already on his feet, wrapping his cloak around his shoulders. He leans close, whispers so quietly you almost don't hear. Matins, 2 in the morning. We pray now. and you realize this is it. This is the rhythm, the bells, the cold, the prayers in the dead of night. This is what you signed up for. This is survival, not of the body, but of something else. Something harder to name. You stand, your legs stiff, your breath misting, and follow the others out into the dark corridor. The cold wraps around you like a living thing, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and discomfort, you feel it. The pull, the reason you came. The promise that maybe, just maybe, in this frozen stone tomb of a monastery, you'll find what you've been looking for. Welcome home, asterisk. The rule of silence and the rhythm of bells, asterisk. You wake to bells in the dead of night, and for a moment you forget where you are. Then the cold reminds you, sharp, immediate, unforgiving. Your eyes snap open to darkness so complete you can't see your own hand in front of your face. But you can hear the bell tolling, slow and methodical, once, twice, 3 times. And then the rustle of bodies rising around you, the soft shuffle of feet on stone, the whisper of wool against wool as novices pulled their cloaks tight. No one speaks. Not a word. Not even a murmur. You learn this immediately, instinctively, the way a child learns not to touch fire. Silence is the rule here. Not just encouraged, not just preferred, mandatory. You sit up, your joints stiff from the cold and the hard mattress, and watch the shadows move around you. The other novices are already standing, already moving toward the door. You scramble to follow, your fingers fumbling with your cloak, your feet searching for your sandals in the darkness. The corridor outside is lit by a single candle in a wall sconce, its flame guttering in the draft. The light it provides is minimal, just enough to keep you from walking into walls. The novices file out in a silent procession, and you fall into line, trying to match their pace, their posture, their absolute quiet. Your breath comes out in visible puffs. The stone floor beneath your sandals is so cold it burns. And still, no one speaks. You follow them through the maze of corridors, down a set of worn stone steps, across the cloister where frost glitters on the bare earth of the garden, and finally into the chapel. The space opens up around you, vast and dark and echoing. High vaulted ceilings disappear into shadow. Narrow windows let in nothing, no moonlight, no starlight, just more darkness. The only illumination comes from candles on the altar, their flames small and brave and utterly insufficient. The monks are already here, not just novices, but the full brothers, maybe 60 men in total, standing in neat rows in the choir stalls. They look like ghosts in their gray and black habits, their faces shadowed, their hands tucked into their sleeves. You find a place at the back, in the section reserved for novices, and you stand, waiting, freezing, wondering what happens next, and then it begins. A single voice, low and sonorous, rising from somewhere in the darkness. Latin words you barely understand, but the melody is ancient, beautiful, haunting. Domini, labia mea pries, Lord, open my lips. Other voices join, layering over the first, creating a sound that seems to come from the stones themselves. This is matins, the night office, the prayers said when the rest of the world is sleeping. 2 in the morning, the darkest, coldest part of the night. And these men are singing. You try to follow along, mouthing words you don't know, feeling foolish and lost. but something about the sound grabs hold of you. It's not just singing, it's something older, deeper, a kind of collective breathing. The voices rise and fall in waves, filling the chapel with sound that pushes back against the darkness and the cold. You can feel it in your chest, resonating in your bones. For a moment, you forget how cold you are. For a moment, there's only the music and the darkness and the sense that you're part of something much, much larger than yourself. The prayers go on for what feels like hours. Psalms, responses, readings. The monks stand perfectly still, their voices never wavering, their discipline absolute. You shift from foot to foot, trying to keep circulation going in your frozen toes. Your knees ache, your back aches, your eyelids grow heavy, and you have to fight to stay awake. This is the test, you realize. Not just physical endurance, but the willingness to show up, night after night, in the darkest hours, and offer your voice, your presence, your devotion to something beyond yourself. Finally, mercifully, the prayers end. The last note hangs in the air for a moment, then fades into silence. The monks file out, still without speaking, and you follow them back through the frozen corridors to the dormitory. You collapse onto your cot, too exhausted to even think about how cold you are. But sleep doesn't come easy. Your mind is buzzing with the strangeness of it all. The bells, the darkness, the singing, the absolute, crushing silence. When you wake again, it's to another bell lauds, dawn prayers. Except dawn is a generous term here. When you stumble out of the dormitory and into the cloister, the sky is just barely lightening from black to deep gray. There's no sun, just the suggestion that somewhere beyond the heavy clouds, light might exist. The cold has intensified overnight. Frost coats everything now. The stones, the dead garden, the bare branches of the trees visible beyond the cloister walls. Your breath comes out in thick clouds. Again, the chapel. Again, the standing in the cold. Again, the voices rising in prayer. But this time, you're more awake, more aware. You start to notice the details. The way Brother Anselm's voice cracks slightly on the high notes. The way the abbot stands perfectly still in his stall, his hands folded, his face serene. The way some of the older monks sway slightly, as if the prayers are moving through them like wind through trees. After lauds comes prime, the first hour, then terce at mid-morning. Each office is shorter than matins, but they all follow the same structure. Psalms, readings, hymns. Stand, sit, kneel. The rhythm is hypnotic, exhausting, relentless. By the time terce ends, your legs are shaking, your stomach is growling, and you're pretty sure you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like, because you still haven't spoken. Not one word since you arrived. It's after terce that Brother Thomas finds you in the cloister. He doesn't say anything at first, just gestures for you to follow. You do, walking behind him through corridors you're starting to recognize, until he stops in a small side room. A few other novices are already there, looking as confused and exhausted as you feel. Brother Thomas closes the door and, for the first time since you arrived, speaks at length. You are novices under the rule of Saint Benedict, he begins, his voice flat and authoritative. You will learn discipline, obedience, and humility. But first, you must learn silence. Speech is permitted only during chapter meetings, during instruction, and with explicit permission from your superior. At all other times, you will communicate using the signs. He holds up his hands and begins demonstrating. A fist pressed against the chest means bread. 2. Fingers tapped against the lips means water. Arms crossed over the chest means cold. Hands pressed together means prayer. Fingers pointing downward means sleep. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds, a whole language made of gestures. You try to memorize them, but they blur together. Brother Thomas is patient, though. He makes you practice, correcting your hand positions, drilling the most essential signs until your fingers ache. Why silence? One of the novices dares to ask. He's younger than you, maybe 15, with a thin face and nervous eyes. Brother Thomas looks at him for a long moment, because words are easy. Silence is hard. Words let you hide. Silence forces you to face yourself. God speaks in the quiet, not in the noise. You want to hear him? Then learn to shut your mouth. The lesson continues for another hour. Signs for sick, help, hurry, come, go. You practice with the other novices, fumbling through basic exchanges. It feels absurd at first, like playing a children's game. But then you realize how precise it is, how much can be communicated without sound. A raised eyebrow, a slight nod, a hand gesture. In some ways, it's more honest than speech. There's no lying in sign language, no clever words to hide behind, just intention, clear and simple. When the lesson ends, Brother Thomas dismisses you with a final instruction. The bells govern your life now. Learn them. Matins at 2, lauds at dawn, prime after, terce at mid-morning, sext at midday, none in the afternoon, vespers at dusk, compline before bed. 8 times a day you will stop whatever you're doing and attend to prayer. The bells are your master, not me, not the abbot. The bells. You file out of the room and back into the silence. The cold has seeped into your bones now, a constant presence you're starting to accept rather than fight. You walk through the cloister, watching the other monks go about their tasks. A brother sweeps frost from the walkway. Another carries a basket of turnips toward the kitchen. An old monk sits on a stone bench, his eyes closed, his lips moving in silent prayer. No one speaks. No one needs to. You find yourself standing in the center of the cloister garden, staring up at the gray sky. The wind bites at your face. Your hands are numb inside your sleeves. And yet, for the first time since you arrived, you feel something other than fear or cold or exhaustion. You feel ... stillness, not peace, exactly, not comfort, but a kind of settling, like your mind is finally quieting down after years of noise. The bell rings, sext, midday prayers. You turn and walk toward the chapel, and as you do, you realize something profound. Time here doesn't pass the way it does in the outside world. There are no hours or minutes. There are only bells, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. The day is broken into pieces, each one marked by prayer, each one a small surrender to the rhythm of monastic life. You enter the chapel and take your place among the novices. The voices rise again, chanting the midday psalms. Your own voice is still silent, but you mouth the words, letting the sounds wash over you. And slowly, imperceptibly, you begin to understand. This is what you came here for. Not to escape the world, but to learn a different way of being in it, to let go of control, to trust the bells, to find God, or yourself, or whatever it is you're searching for. In the spaces between the chanting and the silence, days blur together, matins in the dark, lauds at dawn, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, the bells ring, and you move. Prayer, work, prayer, meal, prayer, work, prayer, sleep, repeat. The routine is suffocating at first, then comforting. You stop thinking about what comes next, because you always know. The bells tell you, the rule tells you. Your body begins to memorize the rhythm, waking before the bell, knowing without looking when it's time for vespers, feeling the pull of Compline before the sun has fully set. You learn the hand signs: bread, water, cold, help, sick, come, go, wait, hurry. You have entire conversations without speaking. A novice asks for water by tapping his lips. You nod and point toward the well. Another signals that he's cold, arms crossed over his chest, and you gesture toward the calefactory, the warming room. It's efficient, strange, but it works. The silence changes you. At first, it's oppressive, a weight pressing down on your chest. You want to scream just to hear your own voice. But gradually, the pressure eases. Your thoughts quiet. The constant chatter in your head, the worries and fears and questions, they don't disappear, but they soften. You learn to sit with discomfort, to observe your own mind without being consumed by it. The monks call this contemplation. You call it survival. One evening after Compline, you're walking back to the dormitory when an older monk stops you. Brother Godric. You've noticed him before. A young man, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a gentle way of moving. He gestures for you to wait, then signs a question. How are you? You pause. No one has asked you that since you arrived. You consider lying, signing that you're fine, but something about his expression stops you. Instead, you sign back, cold, tired. He smiles, a small, knowing smile, and signs, everyone is. It gets easier. You want to ask how, when, if it's even true. But the bells are about to ring for sleep, and speech is forbidden after so you just nod, grateful for even that small exchange. Brother Godric presses a hand briefly to your shoulder, a touch so unexpected and human that your eyes sting with tears you didn't know you were holding. Then he's gone, disappearing into the darkness of the corridor. You lie in your cot that night, listening to the breathing of the other novices, the creak of timber, the endless whisper of the wind. The cold is as brutal as ever. Your stomach aches with hunger. Your joints hurt. But something inside you has shifted. The rhythm of the bells, the discipline of the silence, the strange comfort of knowing exactly what comes next. It's starting to make sense. Not in a way you can explain, but in a way you can feel. The monastery isn't trying to make you comfortable. It's trying to make you strong. To strip away everything soft and unnecessary until all that's left is the essential core of who you are. And in the silence, in the cold, in the endless repetition of the bells, you're beginning to find it. If you're enjoying this journey into monastic life, subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into history's quiet corners. Because we're just getting started. Winter is long here, and there's so much more to learn. The dormitory, sleeping in the cold, The dormitory is not a place of rest. Not really. It's a survival chamber. A cold stone box where 20 men lie down each night and hope to wake up in the morning without frostbite or fever. The first week, you don't sleep so much as shiver through the hours between Compline, drifting in and out of a half-conscious state where you're always aware of the cold, always waiting for the bell. The room itself is brutally simple, long and narrow, maybe 50 feet by 20, with a low timber-bird ceiling that sags slightly in the middle. The walls are bare stone, no plaster, no whitewash, just gray rock that weeps with condensation when the temperature shifts. High, narrow windows let in almost no light and even less warmth. The floor is flagstone, smooth from centuries of feet, and so cold that standing on it barefoot for more than a few seconds feels like standing on ice. The cots line both walls, 10 on each side, leaving a narrow aisle down the center. Each bed is identical, a wooden frame, maybe 6 feet long, with rope webbing stretched across to support a thin straw mattress. The straw is old, compressed, and breaks down into dust that gets into your nose and makes you sneeze in the middle of the night. 1 wool blanket per person, gray and scratchy, with moth holes and patches where it's been mended over and over. That's it. No pillows, no sheets, no extra layers, unless the winter gets truly brutal, and even then, the abbot decides who gets a second blanket based on age and health, not comfort. You sleep fully clothed. Everyone does. Your habit stays on. Your undershirt stays on. Your wool hose stay on. On the coldest nights, you add your cloak, wrapping it around yourself like a cocoon. Some monks sleep with their hoods up, covering their faces to trap what little warmth their breath provides. You try this once and wake up gasping, feeling suffocated, but you understand the impulse. Anything to keep the cold at bay. The first night, you lie on your cot and stare at the ceiling, teeth chattering, body rigid with cold. The blanket does almost nothing. The straw mattress, which you thought might provide some insulation, actually seems to make things worse. You can feel every wooden slat beneath you, every knot in the rope webbing. The cold rises from below, seeping through the straw, through your clothes, into your skin. Your feet go numb first, then your fingers, then your nose. You curl into a tight ball, knees to chest, trying to make yourself as small as possible. Around you, the other novices are doing the same. You can hear them shifting, adjusting, pulling their blankets tighter. Someone coughs, a wet, rattling sound that echoes in the darkness. Another person sighs deeply, a sound of resignation. No one speaks. Even here, even suffering together, the rule of silence holds. You're alone in your cold, and so is everyone else. Sleep, when it finally comes, is fitful and strange. You dream of home, of your mother's kitchen, of summer, of warmth. You wake to darkness and cold, and the crushing realization that it wasn't real. The cycle repeats. Sleep, dream, wake, shiver. Sleep, dream, wake, shiver. Hours pass, or maybe minutes, you can't tell. Time stretches and compresses. The cold becomes everything, the only reality, the only truth. And then the bell rings. Matins, 2 in the morning. The worst time to wake up, when your body is finally, barely, starting to generate some heat. You force yourself to sit up, and the cold hits you like a slap. The air in the dormitory is somehow colder than when you went to bed. Frost has formed on the inside of the windows, delicate patterns that would be beautiful if you weren't so miserable. Your breath comes out in thick clouds. Your fingers are so stiff you can barely grasp your cloak. The other novices are moving like ghosts, slow and mechanical. No one is fully awake. You shuffle toward the door, your sandals slapping against the frozen stone, and file out into the corridor. The chapel will be even colder. You know this now, but at least there will be movement. Standing and kneeling and singing, and movement generates heat. The dormitory is a tomb. The chapel is marginally less dead. By the second week, you've developed strategies, small, desperate tricks to survive the nights. You learn to sleep on your side, with your hands tucked between your thighs, trapping what little warmth your core generates. You learn to breathe slowly and shallowly, because deep breaths bring the cold air too far into your lungs and make you cough. You learn to position your blanket so it covers your feet and chest, sacrificing your arms to the cold, because those are easier to tuck inside your habit. You also learn to sleep close to other bodies. This isn't a rule, exactly, but it's an unspoken practice. On the coldest nights, the novices shift their cots closer together, just a few inches. Enough that the shared body heat makes a difference. Not much, but some. You wake one morning to find that the boy in the cot next to yours, a thin, pale novice named Alric, has moved his bed so close it's almost touching yours. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. You understand, the cold affects everyone differently. Some adapt quickly, their bodies hardening to the constant chill. Others struggle. Brother Cedric, an older novice who joined last year, develops a terrible cough that keeps everyone awake. You can hear him in the darkness, hacking and gasping, trying to muffle the sound with his blanket. Brother Thomas brings him extra broth from the kitchen and permission to sleep closer to the calefactory, but it doesn't seem to help. The cough persists, wet and deep and worrying. Then there's Brother Osric, a young man from the lowlands, with a quiet, serious face. He never complains, never asks for help, but you notice he's always shivering, even during the day. His lips have a bluish tint, his fingers are swollen and red, signs of early frostbite. One morning, you wake to find his cot empty. Brother Thomas tells you later, using signs, that Osric has been moved to the infirmary. He doesn't say whether Osric will recover or not. You don't ask. The dormitory becomes a place of intimate suffering. You hear everything. The snoring, the coughing, the whimpering of someone caught in a nightmare. The sound of teeth chattering. The rustle of someone adjusting their blanket for the 100th time. The wet sound of someone spitting into a rag because the cold has made their sinuses run. It's disgusting and human and strangely bonding. You're all in this together, all freezing, all miserable, all trying to survive until spring on the worst nights. The ones where the wind howls through the cracks in the stone and the frost creeps across the floor like a living thing. You lie awake and wonder why anyone would choose this life, why anyone would voluntarily subject themselves to this kind of suffering. The answer, you're starting to realize, is that suffering has a purpose here. It's not random or cruel, it's intentional. The cold strips away everything soft, everything comfortable, everything that distracts you from what's essential. It forces you to confront yourself, your weaknesses, your fears, your desperate need for warmth and comfort and security. And in confronting those things, you have a choice: break or become something harder, something stronger. You choose not to break. Every night, you lie down on that hard cot, pull that thin blanket over yourself, and endure. And every morning, you wake up, cold, tired, aching, but alive. That becomes enough. Not happiness, not comfort, but survival. And in survival, there's a strange kind of pride. The communal aspect of the dormitory also reveals itself slowly. You start to notice patterns. Brother Alric always sleeps on his back, perfectly still, like a carved stone effigy. Brother Edmund thrashes in his sleep, kicking and muttering, and more than once you wake to find his blanket on the floor. Brother Wulfric snores, a deep, resonant sound that would be funny if it wasn't keeping everyone awake. And then there's Brother Godric, who you saw in the cloister, who always seems calm, even here. He sleeps, curled up like a child, hands tucked under his chin, and somehow he makes it look peaceful. One night, after Compline, you're lying in your cot when you hear movement. Brother Godric is kneeling beside Brother Edmund's bed, picking up the blanket Edmund has kicked off in his sleep and gently tucking it back around him. Edmund doesn't wake. He just sighs and rolls over. Godric stays there for a moment, his hand resting briefly on Edmund's shoulder, and then he returns to his own cot. No one says anything. No one needs to. It's a small act of kindness, almost invisible. But in this place, in this cold, it's everything. You start doing the same. When Ulric's blanket slips off his feet, you lean over and adjust it. When Cedric's coughing gets bad, you bring him your water cup in the morning. When a new novice arrives, shivering and terrified on his first night, you move your cot closer to his, just a few inches, enough that he knows he's not alone. These gestures don't make the cold go away. They don't make the dormitory any warmer or the nights any shorter, but they make them bearable. The dormitory also teaches you about mortality. Winter illnesses are common here. Coughs turn into fevers. Fevers turn into pneumonia. Pneumonia kills. You watch Brother Osric return from the infirmary after 2 weeks, pale and thin, his eyes hollow. He's alive, but barely. He moves slowly, carefully, like someone who's seen death up close and is still trying to figure out how he escaped. A month later, an older monk, Brother Alred, doesn't escape. He dies in his sleep, and you wake one morning to find his cot stripped, his body already taken to the chapel for prayers before burial. No one mourns loudly. There are no tears, no wailing, no dramatic displays of grief. The monks simply fold Alred's blanket, remove his mattress, and prepare the cot for the next person. At lauds, the abbot mentions Alred's name in prayer, commending his soul to God, and that's it. Life continues. The bells keep ringing. The cold keeps pressing in. Death is part of the rhythm here, expected and accepted. You'll die when God calls you, not before, and until then, you endure. The nights grow longer as winter deepens. By December, it's dark by 4 in the afternoon, and the sun doesn't rise until well after lauds. The dormitory becomes a cave, a place where light barely penetrates. You lose track of time. Days blur into nights, blur into days. The only markers are the bells. And even those start to feel like part of a dream. You develop a relationship with your cot, your small section of the dormitory. It's yours, not in the sense of ownership. You own nothing here, but in the sense of territory. This is where you sleep. This is where you suffer. This is where you survive. You know every lump in the mattress, every squeak in the rope webbing, every cold spot on the floor beneath. It's not home, exactly, but it's familiar. And in a place as strange and harsh as this, familiar is something. One night, you wake to find snow drifting through a gap in the window. Small white flakes settle on your blanket, on your face, melting instantly from your body heat, but leaving behind a cold wetness. You should be alarmed, but you're too tired. You just brush the snow off and pull your blanket tighter. Brother Thomas will fix the window tomorrow. Or he won't. Either way, you'll survive. You always do. The dormitory, you realize, is a microcosm of the monastery itself. It's a place of suffering and endurance, but also of community and quiet compassion. You're all freezing together, all struggling together, all learning together what it means to live with less, to want less, to need less. The cold is the teacher, and the lesson is always the same. You're stronger than you think. You can endure more than you believe possible. And you're never truly alone, even when you feel like you are, as you lie in the darkness. Listening to the breathing of the other novices, you feel a strange sense of gratitude. Not for the cold, never for the cold, but for this shared suffering, this collective survival, this knowledge that 20 other men are lying in their cots, just as cold and miserable as you, and yet still here, still choosing to stay, still believing that this life, as harsh as it is, has meaning. The bell will ring in a few hours, matins. You'll wake in the darkness and the cold, and you'll drag yourself to the chapel, and you'll sing, and then you'll come back here, to this dormitory, to this cot, to this thin blanket and hard mattress, and you'll try to sleep, and you'll do it all again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, because that's what you do here. You endure, and in enduring, you become something more than you were, something harder, something holier, something that can survive a winter in a stone dormitory without a fire. Drop a comment if you've ever slept somewhere so cold you had to keep your socks on, because trust me, you're keeping everything on here. Warming methods, the calefactory and rare fires. The calefactory becomes a kind of promised land. You count the hours until your turn by the fire. You dream about it. You plan for it. Because in a monastery where warmth is not just rare but practically forbidden, the calefactory is the one place where cold loosens its grip, where your fingers stop aching, where you remember what it feels like to be human instead of a frozen statue pretending to pray. The word itself comes from Latin, calefacere, to make warm. It's tucked away in a corner of the monastery, a small vaulted room maybe 20 feet square with thick stone walls and a single massive fireplace that dominates one end. The fireplace is deep enough to stand in, with a hearth of blackened stone and an opening so large you could roast an entire pig if the rule allowed such excess, which it doesn't. The fire that burns there is modest, carefully managed, rationed, like everything else in this place. But it's real, it's heat, and for the few precious minutes you're allowed inside, it's salvation. You don't get access to the calefactory immediately. That would be too merciful. First, you have to earn it by proving you can survive without it. The first 2 weeks, you're not permitted inside at all. You walk past the door, knowing warmth is just beyond that threshold, and you're not allowed to enter. It's a test. Can you endure? Can you function while your fingers are numb and your toes are screaming and every breath hurts your lungs? The monastery wants to know. So you prove it. You work in the scriptorium with frozen hands. You kneel in the chapel with ice in your bones. You sleep in the dormitory and wake up covered in frost. And you don't complain, because complaining is just words, and words are wasted here. Finally, Brother Thomas grants you permission. It's after terce on a particularly brutal December morning when the wind is howling through the cloister, and the snow is falling so thick you can barely see across the courtyard. He finds you in the corridor, catches your eye, and makes the sign, Calefactory, now 1 hour. Your heart leaps. 1 hour. 60 minutes of warmth. You follow him through the maze of cold passages until he stops at a heavy oak door bound with iron. You'll share the time with others, he says, actually speaking, because this is instruction, not casual conversation. The fire is kept burning from Lauds until Compline during the coldest months. Each man gets 1 hour per day, sometimes less if the wood supply is low. You'll rotate with your fellow novices. Don't waste the time. Warm your hands, dry your clothes if they're damp, but don't linger past your allotted hour. Others are waiting. He opens the door, and the warmth hits you like a physical force. You actually gasp. After weeks of unrelenting cold, the sensation is so intense, it's almost painful. Your skin prickles. Your eyes water. You step inside, and Brother Thomas closes the door behind you, leaving you alone with the fire. The calefactory is dim despite the flames. The windows are small and high, designed to keep heat in rather than let light flood the space. The walls are lined with stone benches worn smooth by generations of monks seeking warmth. The ceiling is low and vaulted, blackened with centuries of smoke. And in the center of it all, the fireplace. The fire itself isn't roaring. It's not the kind of blaze you'd see in a great hall or a tavern. It's controlled, efficient, built for maximum heat with minimum fuel. Logs are stacked carefully, burning slow and steady, with red coals glowing beneath. The warmth radiates outward in waves. You stand there for a moment, just absorbing it. Then you move closer, extending your hands toward the flames. The heat is almost unbearable at first. Your fingers, numb for so long, start to tingle painfully as blood flow returns. You flex them, wincing, watching as the blue-white color fades to pink. You hold your hands closer, turning them over, letting the warmth penetrate deep into your bones. It feels like being reborn. There are 2 other monks in the calefactory. One is an older brother, maybe 60, with a face like weathered leather and hands gnarled with arthritis. He sits on one of the stone benches, his feet extended toward the fire, his eyes half closed in something like bliss. The other is a younger monk, perhaps 30, who's using the warmth to dry a damp habit he's hung on a wooden frame near the flames. Steam rises from the wool in gentle wisps. Neither man speaks. The silence rule holds, even here. Even in this sanctuary, you find a place on the bench and sit, your whole body oriented toward the fire like a flower toward the sun. Slowly, incrementally, the cold begins to release its grip. Your toes start to hurt as they thaw, a sharp needling pain that makes you grit your teeth. Your ears burn. Your nose runs. These are good signs. Pain means sensation. Sensation means you're still alive, still functional. You sit there and let the warmth work its way through your layers of wool, through your skin, into your muscles and joints. The hour passes too quickly. You try to stretch it, to savor every minute. But time in the calefactory moves differently than time in the chapel or the dormitory. There, minutes drag into hours. Here, hours collapse into minutes. You watch the fire, mesmerized by the dancing flames, the shifting colors, the occasional pop and hiss when sap ignites. You think about nothing. For once, your mind is quiet. There's only the fire and the warmth and the profound relief of not being cold, brother. Thomas returns exactly 1 hour later. You know because he's counting, because the rule demands precision, because fairness requires everyone get the same amount of time. He opens the door and the cold rushes in like an unwelcome guest. You stand reluctantly, every muscle protesting the return to the frozen world outside. The older monk rises too, moving stiffly, his face already resigned to the cold he's about to re-enter. The younger monk collects his now dry habit and nods in silent thanks to the fire. You step back into the corridor, and the cold slams into you with renewed viciousness. It feels worse now, sharper, more personal, because you know what you're missing. You know that just behind that door, warmth exists, real warmth, and you can't have it, not for another 23 hours. The contrast is cruel, but you also understand why it's done this way. If the calefactory were open all the time, if monks could come and go as they pleased, they'd never leave. They'd huddle by the fire and neglect their duties. The work of the monastery would grind to a halt. The prayers would go unsaid. The manuscripts wouldn't get copied. The fields wouldn't get tended. So the warmth is rationed, carefully measured out, just enough to keep everyone functional, but not enough to make them comfortable. Comfort, you're learning, is not the goal here. Endurance is. Over the following weeks, you come to treasure your daily hour in the calefactory. It becomes the center point around which the rest of your day revolves. You wake at matins thinking about it. You work through terse, anticipating it. You endure sext, knowing it's coming. And when your hour finally arrives, you sink into that warmth like a man sinking into a feather bed, grateful and exhausted, and briefly, mercifully warm. You also start to notice things. The way the fire is tended with almost religious care. There's always a brother assigned to maintain it, to add logs at precise intervals, to adjust the airflow, to make sure it never dies completely and never burns too hot. It's an art, fire keeping, and the monks here have perfected it. They know exactly how much wood to use, how to stack the logs for maximum efficiency, how to nurse flames through the night on minimal fuel. Nothing is wasted. The wood itself is precious. You learn this when you're assigned to help Brother Cuthbert, the monastery's woodsman, gather and split logs. It's back-breaking work in the dead of winter. The trees are frozen solid, and splitting them requires strength and patience. Each log is inspected, sorted by type and size, then stored in the woodshed where it dries slowly over months. Oak burns longest, ash burns hottest. Pine is avoided except in emergencies because it creates too much creosote. Brother Cuthbert knows every tree in the monastery's forest knows which ones can be harvested and which must be left to grow. He treats the wood with reverence, because wood is life. Wood is warmth. Wood is survival. You also learn about the other heated spaces in the monastery, though heated is a generous term. The kitchen, where meals are prepared, has a large hearth that burns constantly. It's not for warmth, officially, but the cooks don't mind that it makes their workspace almost tolerable. The infirmary, where the sick are tended, has a small fireplace that's kept lit during the coldest months. The elderly and the ill get priority for warmth. That's part of the rules. Compassion. If you're dying, at least you die warm. But the rest of the monastery, the vast majority of it, remains brutally cold. The chapel is an icebox. The scriptorium is a freezer. The refectory is barely warmer than outside. The dormitory might as well be a meat locker. You work, pray, eat, and sleep in temperatures that would make most people weep. And you do it without complaint, because complaining doesn't change the cold. It just wastes breath. One afternoon, you're granted permission to work in the calefactory for a special task. Brother Anselm, the master scribe, has a manuscript that needs careful attention, gilding work that requires steady hands, and he's assigned you to help. You carry the precious vellum pages to the calefactory, where the warmth will keep the gold leaf pliable and your fingers functional. It's the longest stretch you've ever spent in that room, nearly 3 hours, and it's revelatory. Working in the warmth, you realize how much the cold has been affecting you. Your handwriting improves immediately. Your focus sharpens. The constant low-level shivering that's become background noise to your existence finally stops, and you can concentrate fully on the delicate work of applying gold to the initial letters of a psalm. Brother Anselm works beside you in silence, but you catch him smiling slightly, pleased with your progress. The warmth unlocks something in you: precision, care, beauty. When the work is done and you're dismissed back into the cold, you feel the loss acutely. You've had a taste of what life could be like if warmth were abundant, and it makes the cold harder to bear, not easier. This, you realize, is another lesson. The monastery doesn't just teach you to endure hardship. It teaches you to want less, to need less, to find contentment in deprivation. The brief taste of comfort isn't meant to make you happy. It's meant to show you that happiness isn't the point. But there are moments when the system breaks down, when even the strict rationing of warmth can't keep people alive. A novice named Brother Anselm, not the scribe, but a younger boy from the Midlands, develops severe frostbite on his feet. He's given extra time in the calefactory, and his feet are wrapped in warm cloths soaked in heated wine, a treatment Brother Clement swears by. For a while, it seems to work. The blackened skin on his toes begins to heal. But then infection sets in. The warmth came too late. Anselm loses 3 toes to the surgeon's knife. He survives, but he'll never walk the same way again. You witness this, and it terrifies you. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. It maims, it kills. And the single hour per day in the calefactory isn't enough to fully protect you. It's just enough to keep you functional, to prevent the worst of the damage, but not enough to eliminate the risk. You're always one bad night, one soaked habit, one missed meal away from serious harm, so you become obsessed with staying dry. Dampness is death in cold like this. If your habit gets wet from snow or sweat, or washing. You do everything possible to dry it quickly. You hang it near the kitchen hearth if you can sneak permission. You wave it in front of the calefactory fire during your precious hour. You even sleep in it sometimes, hoping your body heat will draw out the moisture. Because a wet habit in winter is a recipe for hypothermia. And hypothermia is a quiet, insidious killer. The monks develop other tricks too. Some wrap their feet in dried moss before putting on their sandals, creating an extra layer of insulation. Others rub their hands with rendered fat, which seems to help protect the skin from cracking in the cold. A few of the older monks keep small heated stones in their pockets, rocks warmed by the fire and wrapped in cloth. Portable heat sources that last for maybe an hour before they cool completely. It's not much, but it's something. And then there's the huddling. On the absolute worst nights, when the wind is howling and the temperature drops below anything you've ever experienced, the rules bend slightly. The novices are allowed to push their cots together in the dormitory, creating a shared sleeping space where body heat combines. It's cramped and uncomfortable, and you can smell everyone's breath, but it works. The collective warmth of 20 bodies is more than the sum of its parts. You wake in the morning to find yourself tangled with other men, limbs overlapping, blankets shared, and you don't care, because you're alive. Because you made it through another night. The calefactory remains your anchor. That 1 hour per day is what keeps you sane, keeps you human, keeps you believing that someday, somehow, this winter will end. You live for that hour. You dream about it. And when you're finally inside, sitting by the fire, feeling warmth seep into your frozen bones, you understand something fundamental about monastic life. It's not about denying yourself pleasure. It's about understanding that survival sometimes requires deprivation. That warmth means more when it's rare. That comfort has value only when you know what it's like to live without it. Let me know what else you'd like to hear about. Castle life, peasant cottages, village winters. Because this monastery is just one version of winter survival. And there were many ways to freeze in the Middle Ages. You stand and leave the calefactory, stepping back into the frozen corridor, and the cold wraps around you like an old enemy. But you don't collapse. You don't despair. You simply pull your cloak tighter, make the sign for cold to the brother passing by, and walk toward the chapel for none, because the bells are ringing. And the bells don't care if you're warm or not. They just keep ringing. The scriptorium, copying manuscripts in winter year hand cramps. The quill slips. A drop of ink mars the margin of a psalm you've spent 3 hours perfecting. Brother Anselm sighs but says nothing. You learn that mistakes are part of the cold. The scriptorium is where beauty and suffering collide. It's a long, high-ceilinged room on the monastery's south side, positioned to catch what little winter light manages to penetrate the heavy gray sky. Tall, narrow windows line the wall, unglazed except for oiled parchment stretched across wooden frames. The parchment lets in light, but keeps out almost no cold. In summer, this room must be pleasant, flooded with sun, warm and bright. In winter, it's a torture chamber, disguised as a workshop. You're assigned here after your 3rd week. Once Brother Thomas decides you've proven your discipline. Copying manuscripts is considered sacred work, the preservation of knowledge, the multiplication of God's word. It's also meticulous. demanding, and nearly impossible when your fingers are so cold they barely respond to your brain's commands. But that doesn't matter. The work must be done. Winter or not, manuscripts must be copied. Brother Anselm is the master scribe, a thin man in his 50s, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that squint from decades of close work in dim light. He doesn't speak much, even when speech is permitted, preferring to communicate through demonstration and correction. He shows you how to sit at the writing desk, a slanted wooden surface with a narrow shelf for ink pots and a small ledge to rest the vellum. He shows you how to hold the quill, how to cut the nib to the proper angle, how to dip and stroke and form letters that are both legible and beautiful. Speed comes later. He signs when you attempt to rush through your first line. First, precision. Then, consistency. Then, if God wills it, speed. The scriptorium houses maybe a dozen scribes, a mix of older monks who've been doing this work for decades, and younger novices like you who are still learning. Each scribe has his own desk positioned near a window to maximize light. The desks are arranged in rows, and the room is silent except for the scratch of quills on parchment, the occasional rustle of a page turning, and the constant, omnipresent wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. The cold is different here than in the dormitory or the chapel. It's sharper, more focused, because you're sitting still for hours at a time. There's no movement to generate body heat, no walking or kneeling or standing. You sit hunched over your desk, and the cold settles into you like water into sand, pervasive and inescapable. Your feet go numb first, then your legs, then your backside, but it's your hands that suffer most. Hands are everything in the scriptorium. You need steady, responsive fingers to form clean letters, to apply gold leaf, to mix pigments, to rule margins with a straight edge. But cold hands don't cooperate. They shake, they stiffen. The muscles cramp, the joints ache. You try to write, and the quill wobbles. You try to form a perfect curve for the letter O, and it comes out jagged and uneven. Brother Anselm corrects you, not unkindly, but firmly. Again, again, again. The ink is another problem. In summer, ink flows smoothly from quill to parchment. In winter, it thickens, becomes sluggish, sometimes freezes completely in the pot. The scribes keep small ceramic inkwells that they cradle in their palms between strokes, using body heat to keep the ink liquid. It's not enough. On the coldest days, you have to breathe warm air onto the ink pot, then quickly dip and write before it congeals again. It's maddening, it's exhausting, and it slows everything down. Brother Anselm teaches you a trick. Keep a small heated stone, warmed in the calefactory, wrapped in cloth near your inkwell. It works for maybe an hour before the stone cools, and then you're back to breathing on the ink like you're trying to bring it back to life. Some scribes keep hot water in small bowls, placing their ink pots inside to create a makeshift warming bath. It's precarious. One wrong move, and you've spilled water all over vellum that cost more than a peasant earns in a year. But it's better than frozen ink. The vellum itself becomes brittle in the cold. Vellum is treated animal skin, usually calf or sheep, scraped thin and stretched and dried until it's smooth enough to write on. In normal temperatures, it's flexible, forgiving. In winter, it cracks. You learn to handle it gently, to let it warm slightly in your hands before laying it on the desk, to avoid bending or folding it too sharply. More than once, you watch a careless novice snap a sheet of vellum in half with an audible crack. Brother Anselm doesn't yell. He doesn't punish. He just makes the novice pay for the replacement out of his non-existent allowance, which means months of extra labor in the kitchen or the fields come spring. The work you're doing is copying a psalter, a book of psalms, for a nobleman who's commissioned it from the abbot. It will take months to complete, maybe a year, and it will involve multiple scribes. You're responsible for the plainest sections, the body text, while the more experienced scribes handle the illuminated initials and the decorative borders. Your letters need to be uniform, evenly spaced, legible. No flourishes, no creativity, just clean, consistent script, line after line, page after page. It's meditative work when your hands aren't screaming at you. The rhythm of dip, stroke, lift, dip, stroke, lift. The slow accumulation of letters into words, words into lines, lines into pages. You're not thinking about the meaning of what you're writing, not at first. You're just forming letters. But gradually, the words seep into your consciousness. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. The Psalms are full of longing, desperation, hope, fear. And as you copy them in this freezing room, they start to feel personal. Brother Anselm occasionally assigns you special tasks that require working in the calefactory, where warmth allows for finer detail work. Gilding is always done there. Gold leaf is impossibly thin, fragile, and temperamental. It requires steady hands, good light, and warmth to apply correctly. You watch Brother Anselm demonstrate, brushing adhesive onto the parchment, carefully lifting a sheet of gold leaf with a specialized tool, laying it onto the adhesive, then gently tamping it down with a polishing stone. The result is luminous, divine, a letter that seems to glow with inner light. He lets you try. Your first attempt is a disaster. The gold leaf tears. Your adhesive is too thick. The letter looks blotchy and amateurish. Brother Anselm examines it, then signs, better. Try again. You do. Again and again and again. Over weeks, you improve. Your hands learn the feel of the gold, the precise pressure needed, the patience required. And one day, you complete a gilded initial P that Brother Anselm actually nods at. Not praise, exactly, but acknowledgement. You've crossed a threshold. The scriptorium is also a place of quiet community. The scribes can't speak, but they communicate in other ways. A shared glance when someone makes a mistake. A hand on the shoulder when someone's struggling. The silent passing of tools, quills, knives for trimming parchment, rulers for marking margins. You start to recognize the other scribes' handwriting, their quirks and styles. Brother Columba has beautiful, flowing letters, but terrible spacing. Brother Wulfstan writes with mechanical precision, but no artistry. Brother Godric, who you're growing to appreciate, has a graceful, elegant hand that makes even the plainest text look like poetry. Godric works 2 desks away from you, and sometimes, when the light is right, you catch him looking at you, not critically, not judgmentally, just checking in, making sure you're okay. Once, when your hands are shaking so badly you can't form letters, he quietly reaches over and places his own heated stone near your inkwell, sacrificing his own comfort for yours. You want to thank him, but words aren't allowed. So you just nod, and he nods back, and you understand that this is friendship here. Small gestures, quiet sacrifices. The days in the scriptorium blur together. The light changes slightly as winter progresses. The sun tracing a lower arc across the sky, the daylight hours shrinking further. By mid-January, you're working mostly by candlelight, which strains your eyes and makes the cold somehow worse. The candles provide almost no warmth, just pools of yellow light that illuminate your work and deepen the shadows around you. You develop a routine. Arrive after prime. Prepare your desk. Sharpen quills. Mix ink if needed. Lay out vellum. Work until terse. Attend prayers. Return and work until sext. Break for the midday meal. Work until none. Prayers again. Then back to the scriptorium until the light fails completely. It's grueling. Your back aches from hunching over the desk. Your neck is stiff. Your eyes burn. Your hands are in a constant state of cramping. But the work gets done. Line by line, page by page. There's pride in it, you discover. Not the sinful kind. Brother Thomas would be quick to correct that, but a quiet satisfaction. You're creating something that will last longer than you will. This psalter you're working on might survive for centuries. Long after you're dead and forgotten, someone will read these words, trace these letters with their eyes, and never know that you copied them in a freezing scriptorium in the winter of 1324, with hands so cold you could barely hold the quill. The illuminated pages are works of art. You watch Brother Anselm and the master illuminators work on them during your breaks. They paint miniature scenes in the margins. David playing his harp, Christ in glory, angels with impossible wings. They use pigments made from crushed minerals, plants, even insects. Lapis lazuli for the deepest blues. Vermilion for reds. Gold, always gold, for divinity. The colors are vibrant, even in the dim scriptorium light. Small explosions of beauty in a world of gray and cold. But beauty has a price. The pigments are expensive. The vellum is expensive. The time is expensive. A single mistake can cost the monastery significantly. So the pressure is constant. Perfection isn't expected. Everyone makes mistakes, but carelessness is unforgivable. You learn to check and double, to rule your margins carefully, to count your lines, to compare your letters to the exemplar Brother Anselm provides, to never ever rush. One afternoon, disaster strikes. Brother Edmund, a novice, even newer than you, knocks over his inkpot. Black ink floods across his desk, soaking the vellum he's been working on for 3 days, spilling onto the floor, splattering his habit. The room freezes. Everyone stops working. Brother Edmund looks horrified, his face pale, his hands shaking. Brother Anselm rises slowly and walks over. He examines the damage in silence. The vellum is ruined. The desk is stained. Edmund's work is gone. Anselm signs, "Clean it now, then come to me." His face is stern but not angry. Edmund scrambles to obey, using rags to soak up the ink, his hands black, his eyes brimming with tears he's not allowed to shed. You feel a pang of sympathy. It could have been you. It could have been anyone. The cold makes you clumsy. Exhaustion makes you careless. Accidents happen. Later, Brother Anselm gives Edmund extra copying work as penance. Not punishment, exactly, but a lesson. Be more careful. Pay more attention. The work is too important for carelessness. Edmund nods and accepts the assignment without complaint. That's the way here. You make mistakes, you learn, you move on. The winter deepens. The scriptorium gets colder. You develop chilblains on your fingers, painful swelling that makes every pen stroke agony. Brother Clement gives you a salve, something made from beeswax and herbs, and it helps a little. Not much, but a little. You keep working. The psalm progresses, line by line, word by word, letter by letter. Subscribe if you love deep dives into the everyday lives of historical people, the stuff textbooks skip over. Because this is it. This is what medieval scholarship actually looked like. Cold hands, frozen ink, endless patience, and the slow, painstaking creation of beauty in the most hostile conditions imaginable. One evening, just before the light fails completely, you finish a page, a full page, 25 lines of clean, consistent script. You sit back and look at it, really look at it, and you feel something unexpected. Joy, not happiness exactly, but satisfaction, pride, the knowledge that you've done something difficult and done it well. Brother Anselm walks by, glances at your work, and signs, "Good." Tomorrow, you start the next page. And you will, because that's what you do here. You show up. You sit in the cold. You fight your cramping hands and your frozen ink and your exhaustion. And you create. You copy. You preserve. And in doing so, you become part of something larger than yourself. A tradition stretching back centuries and forward into a future you'll never see. You stand. Stretch your aching back and walk stiffly toward the chapel for vespers. Your hands are still black with ink. Your fingers still ache. But you're smiling slightly, even though no one can see. Because today, despite the cold, despite the suffering, you made something beautiful. Food, fasting, and the refectory. You stare at your bowl of gray pottage and realize this is what sustenance looks like, stripped of pleasure. But your stomach doesn't care it's warm, and it's yours. Food in the monastery is not about enjoyment. It's not about flavor or variety or satisfaction. It's about survival, pure and simple. Calories to keep your body functioning. Nutrients to prevent disease. Enough to sustain you through the brutal work and cold, but never enough to make you comfortable. The rule of Saint Benedict is clear on this. Monks should eat to live, not live to eat. And in winter, when every meal is a carefully calculated distribution of limited resources, that philosophy becomes stark reality. The refectory is where meals happen. A long rectangular room with vaulted ceilings and the same cold stone walls that define every other space in the monastery. Long wooden tables run the length of the room with benches on either side. At one end, a raised platform holds the abbot's table, though he rarely sits there, preferring to take his meals with the brothers. At the other end, a small lectern stands ready for the reader. Because meals here are never taken in mere silence. They're accompanied by scripture or the lives of saints. Feeding the soul while the body eats. The room is freezing. Always, there's no fireplace, no brazier, nothing to warm the space except the collective body heat of 60 men crowded together. You enter for your first meal after terse, your stomach growling after nothing but water since yesterday's supper, and the cold hits you immediately. Your breath mists. The stone floor radiates chill through your sandals. The benches are so cold that sitting on them is like sitting on ice. You find your place at the novices' table, near the back, and stand waiting. Everyone stands. Silence, of course. Always silence. The abbot enters, makes the sign of the cross, and speaks the blessing in Latin. You don't catch all the words, but you understand the gist. Thank God for this food. May it nourish our bodies to serve Him better. Then everyone sits in unison, a coordinated movement that sounds like a single scrape of wood against stone. The meal is brought out by the kitchen brothers, rotating duty that everyone shares. Today it's Brother Cuthbert and Brother Wulfstan carrying large wooden bowls filled with pottage. They move down the tables, ladling portions into each monk's bowl with practiced efficiency. The pottage is thick, steaming slightly in the cold air, and the smell is earthy. Not bad, exactly. Just bland, neutral, forgettable. You look down at your portion. It's a dense, grayish mixture of boiled grains, probably barley, mixed with chopped turnips, onions, and what might be parsnips. No meat. It's a fasting day, Wednesday, which means no animal flesh except for the sick or elderly. Not that there would be much meat anyway. Winter stores are carefully rationed, and a monastery this size can't afford to slaughter livestock frivolously. What little meat exists is preserved, salted, or smoked, and distributed sparingly. Beside your bowl sits a small wooden plate with a thick wedge of bread. The bread is dark, almost black, made from rye and barley flour, with bits of bran visible throughout. It's dense and heavy, the kind of bread that sits in your stomach like a stone. But it's filling, and filling is what matters. There's also a cup of ale, weak and slightly sour, but safer to drink than water, which might carry disease. The reader, a young monk with a clear voice, begins from the lectern. Today it's the life of Saint Anthony, the desert father who lived in solitude and fought demons. His voice echoes in the cold room as you begin to eat. You lift your wooden spoon, scoop up some pottage, and take your first bite. It's warm, which is the best thing about it. Beyond that, it tastes like sustenance. The grains are mushy, the turnips have lost all texture, and the onions provide the only real flavor, sharp and slightly sweet. You eat mechanically, spoon after spoon, because your body needs it. The bread is harder to manage. It's so dense that chewing it is a workout for your jaw. You break off a piece and soften it in the pottage, letting it absorb some of the liquid before eating it. That helps. The ale washes it down, thin and bitter, but wet and cold enough to feel good going down your throat, around you. The other monks eat with the same mechanical efficiency. No one talks, obviously. No one even makes eye contact much. Everyone is focused on their bowl, their bread, their ale. Eating is a task to be completed, not an experience to be savored. The only sound besides the reader's voice is the scrape of spoons against wood, the occasional cough, the creak of benches as men shift position. The portions are small, not starvation level, but not generous either. You finish your pottage in maybe 15 minutes, and your stomach, while no longer growling, isn't exactly satisfied. There's no second serving. What you get is what you get. Brother Thomas explained this during your first week. The monastery has stores to last until spring, but only if everyone eats exactly their allotted portion. Waste is sinful. Gluttony is sinful. Taking more than your share is sinful. So you eat what's given, and you're grateful for it. Let me know in the comments, could you survive on medieval monastery food? Because this is it. This is the menu, with minor variations, for the next 4 months. Breakfast doesn't exist, not as a formal meal. There's nothing between Compline at night and the midday meal after sext, except water and, if you're lucky, a small piece of bread after lauds. The monks call this fasting, though it's really just the normal state of existence. Your body adjusts. The morning hunger pangs fade after the first week. Your stomach learns not to expect food until midday, and eventually it stops complaining. The evening meal, served after none or vespers, depending on the season, is similar to the midday meal, but often smaller. More pottage, sometimes with different vegetables, if the stores have variety. More bread, more ale. On Sundays and feast days, there might be additions: cheese, dried fruit, an egg if you're lucky. But these are exceptions, special occasions that break up the monotony of turnips and barley. The fasting days are harder. Wednesdays and Fridays, plus the entire season of Advent and Lent, are days of stricter fasting. This means 1 meal instead of 2, and that meal is smaller. No dairy, no eggs, no meat, obviously, just grains and vegetables, and sometimes not even that. On the strictest fast days, you get bread and water. That's it. You eat your small loaf, drink your water, and try not to think about how empty you feel. You watch the older monks on these days, the ones who've been doing this for decades, and they seem almost serene. Brother Columba, who must be 70, eats his bread with tiny, deliberate bites, his face peaceful, like he's savoring a feast. Brother Anselm doesn't even seem to notice the deprivation. He eats quickly, efficiently, and returns to his work without complaint. You, on the other hand, spend the entire afternoon fantasizing about food. Real food, your mother's stew, fresh meat, butter, honey, things you took for granted and now dream about like a drowning man dreams about air. The kitchen itself is a mystery at first, a place you're not allowed to enter until you're assigned kitchen duty. When that day comes, about 6 weeks into your stay, you discover it's the warmest room in the entire monastery, which makes the work both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is obvious, you're warm. The curse is that you're working in that warmth, hauling water, chopping vegetables, stirring massive pots of pottage over a fire that never goes out, and sweating through your habit while knowing you'll have to step back into the freezing corridor when your shift ends. Brother Oswald is the head cook, a stocky man with burn scars on his arms and a face permanently reddened from heat. He runs the kitchen with military precision. Everything is measured, portioned, accounted for. The monastery has stores of grain in the cellar, barrels of salted fish, wheels of hard cheese wrapped in cloth, root vegetables buried in sand to keep them from rotting. Brother Oswald knows exactly how much of everything remains, and he calculates daily portions down to the ounce. You learn to make pottage, which is less cooking and more supervised boiling. You start with water, lots of it, in a massive iron cauldron that hangs over the fire. Add barley or oats, whatever grain is being used that day. Let it simmer for hours, stirring occasionally to keep it from burning. Add chopped vegetables, turnips, parsnips, onions, leeks if they're available. Add salt, sparingly, because salt is expensive. Add herbs if Brother Oswald is feeling generous. Thyme, sage. Whatever is dried and stored. Stir, wait, stir, wait. Eventually, it thickens into the gray, glutinous mass that everyone will eat for dinner. The bread baking happens early, before lauds, so the loaves are ready for distribution at meals. You're taught to mix flour, water, salt, and a sourdough starter, then knead the dough until your arms ache. The dough is dense and resistant, nothing like the soft white bread wealthy people eat. This is peasant bread, monk bread, survival bread. It's shaped into round loaves and baked in the large oven built into the kitchen's back wall. The smell of baking bread is intoxicating, especially when you're hungry, which is always. You're not allowed to eat any, of course. Not until mealtime. Not even a small piece to test if it's done. That would be theft, and theft is sin. On fish days, which happen occasionally when the monastery's fish pond yields a catch, or when dried fish from the stores is deemed ready to use, the kitchen becomes slightly more interesting. Brother Oswald shows you how to prepare stockfish, dried cod that's been preserved in salt and air. It's rock hard, like a wooden plank, and has to be soaked in water for a full day before it's even remotely edible. Once soaked, it's boiled with vegetables and herbs to make a thin stew that at least has protein in it. The fish is stringy and bland, but it's different from pottage. And different is almost as good as delicious when you've been eating the same thing for weeks. The monastery's fish pond is a source of fascination. It's outside the walls, a large artificial pond stocked with carp and pike, maintained year-round by Brother Lee Offric, who seems to have a genuine affection for the fish. In winter, he has to break ice to check on them, to make sure they're not dying or being eaten by otters. The fish are a valuable resource, a source of protein on meatless days, and losing them to disease or predators would be a genuine crisis. You're assigned to help Brother Leofric one morning, and he takes you to the pond, showing you how to cast nets, how to judge which fish are large enough to take and which should be left to grow. He's one of the few monks who seems genuinely happy in his work, kneeling in the frozen mud, pulling in nets, sorting fish with practiced hands. When you ask him, using signs, why he likes this work, he signs back. They don't talk. I like that. The cheese is another staple, though it's rationed carefully. The monastery keeps a small herd of cows and goats, whose milk is turned into hard cheese that can be stored for months. The cheese is salty, crumbly, and strong-tasting, not something you'd choose to eat in large quantities, but it's protein and fat, both of which your body desperately needs in winter. On good days, you get a small wedge with your bread. On bad days, it's just bread and pottage. There are moments of unexpected pleasure, though feast days, Christmas, Epiphany, Saints' days. On these occasions, the rule relaxes slightly. The portions are larger. There might be meat, actual meat, roasted or boiled. There might be honey-sweetened cakes, a luxury so profound you eat them slowly, trying to make the taste last. There might even be wine instead of ale, and the wine, though watered down, tastes like celebration. Christmas dinner is the best meal you've had since arriving. Roasted goose, a gift from a benefactor, distributed in small portions, but real and rich and fatty. Bread that's been made with better flour, whiter and softer. Turnips, roasted in goose. Fat, which transforms them from bland mush into something almost delicious. And a piece of spiced cake, dark and dense, sweetened with honey and studded with dried fruits that you don't even recognize but taste like heaven. You eat slowly, savoring every bite, and for the first time in weeks, you feel full, actually full. Your stomach is satisfied, your body is warm from the rich food, and you look around the refectory and see the same contentment on other faces. Even Brother Anselm is smiling slightly. Even the abbot looks pleased. This is what feast days are. For, not just to celebrate Christ or the saints, but to remind everyone that deprivation isn't the only way, that pleasure, in moderation, has its place. But the feast ends. The next day, it's back to pottage and bread. The contrast is jarring. Your stomach, expanded and content, rebels at the return to scarcity. You feel hungrier than you did before. The feast, like your body, is protesting the loss of abundance. But you adjust. You always adjust. That's the lesson here. You can survive on very little if you have to. Your body adapts. Your expectations lower. And eventually, pottage and bread become enough again. You also learn about food as community. The refectory isn't just about eating. It's about being together. Even in silence, even without conversation, there's something communal about sharing a meal. You're all eating the same thing from the same pot, portioned out equally. The abbot eats the same pottage you do. The oldest monk gets the same bread as the newest novice. There's equality in deprivation. No one is special. No one is privileged. You're all just men trying to survive winter together. The meals also provide structure. They're fixed points in the day, anchors that keep you oriented when everything else blurs together. You wake in darkness, but you know that after sext, there will be food. You work all afternoon, but you know that after none, there will be food. The meals might not be exciting, but they're reliable. And reliability, in a place as harsh as this, is its own kind of comfort. There are failures, too. Brothers who can't adjust to the meager portions, whose bodies rebel, who lose too much weight and develop illnesses that Brother Clement can't cure. You watch a novice, Brother Elfric, grow thinner and weaker over weeks, despite eating his full portions. His body just can't adapt. Eventually, he's sent home to his family, released from his vows, because the monastery can't sustain someone who can't sustain themselves. You feel guilty watching him leave. Guilty for surviving when he couldn't, but you also understand. Not everyone is built for this life. The food rationing also means waste is unthinkable. Every crumb is saved. Stale bread is soaked in water or ale to soften it, then eaten. Vegetable peelings go to the pigs or the compost heap. Even the dishwater, gray and greasy, is used to feed the monastery's chickens. Nothing is thrown away. Nothing is wasted. This isn't just frugality, it's survival. The stores have to last until spring, until the gardens can be planted and the first crops harvested. If the food runs out in February, people die. It's that simple. Brother Oswald keeps a careful log of everything. How much grain is left? How many wheels of cheese? How many fish in the pond? How many turnips in the cellar? He reports to the abbot weekly, and the abbot makes decisions based on those numbers. Sometimes portions are reduced. Sometimes fasting days are added. It's all calculated, precise, mathematical. Survival is a numbers game, and Brother Oswald is the accountant. You develop a strange relationship with hunger. At first, it's all you can think about. Your stomach growls constantly, a chorus of complaint that distracts you from prayers and work. But gradually, hunger becomes background noise. You're always aware of it, but it doesn't dominate your thoughts anymore. You learn to function while hungry, to work while hungry, to pray while hungry, to sleep while hungry. Hunger becomes normal, and normal becomes bearable. There are moments when you break, when you're in the kitchen and a piece of bread falls on the floor, and you pick it up, and instead of putting it with the scraps for the pigs, you shove it in your mouth and chew quickly, guiltily, hoping no one sees. Brother Oswald sees. He always sees. But he doesn't say anything. He just looks at you, his expression unreadable, and you know he understands. Everyone breaks sometimes. Everyone steals a bite when they think no one's looking. It's human. It's forgivable. As long as it doesn't happen too often. You finish your evening meal one night, the bowl empty, the bread gone, the ale drunk, and you sit there for a moment with your hands folded, listening to the reader continue the life of St. Anthony the Saint is in the desert, fasting for 40 days, fighting off demons who tempt him with visions of food. You understand those demons now. You understand why food would be the temptation. Not gold or power or pleasure, just food. A full belly, the absence of hunger. That would be paradise. The abbot rises, says the closing prayer, and everyone stands. You file out of the refectory, back into the cold, back to your duties, or to the dormitory, or to the chapel for vespers. Your stomach isn't full, but it's not empty either. You're sustained. That's the word. Sustained, kept alive, kept functioning. That's all food is here. Not pleasure, not joy, not comfort, just fuel, just survival. And as you walk through the frozen cloister, your breath misting in the twilight, you realize you're okay with that. You don't need feasts. You don't need variety. You just need enough. And somehow, miraculously, there's always enough. Barely, but enough. Sickness, healing, and the infirmary. Brother Oswald dies on a Tuesday. You helped carry his body to the chapel. His cot is filled by Thursday. The rhythm doesn't stop. Sickness is not an if in the monastery, it's a when. The cold, the damp, the crowded dormitory, the inadequate food, the exhaustion. All of it creates perfect conditions for illness to spread. A cough in one corner of the dormitory becomes a cough in every corner within days. A fever in the scriptorium travels to the refectory by evening. The monastery is a closed system, and disease moves through it like water through a cracked vessel, inevitable and unstoppable. The infirmary is where the sick go to either recover or die. It's a separate building connected to the main monastery by a covered walkway, positioned slightly apart to isolate the worst cases. You don't see it during your first weeks because you're healthy, or at least functional. And the infirmary is for those who cannot work, cannot pray, cannot fulfill their duties. But after 2 months in the freezing dormitory, after countless nights of inadequate sleep and days of insufficient food, your body finally gives up. It starts with a scratchy throat. Nothing serious, just a tickle that makes you cough during prayers. Then the cough deepens, settling into your chest, wet and rattling. Your head begins to ache, a dull throb behind your eyes that won't go away. You develop a fever. Chills that make you shake even more than the cold usually does. You try to push through, to attend prayers and work in the scriptorium. But Brother Anselm takes one look at you and signs, "Infirmary." Now, you walk there yourself. Though the journey feels longer than it should, the covered walkway is open to the elements on one side, and the wind cuts through your cloak. Your legs feel weak, unsteady. When you finally push open the infirmary door, the warmth hits you like a wall. There's a fire here, an actual fire burning in a real fireplace, and the room is warmer than anywhere you've been except the calefactory. It's disorienting. Your fevered brain can't quite process the sudden shift from freezing to warm. Brother Clement is the infirmarian, the monk responsible for the sick. He's maybe 50, with kind eyes, gentle hands, and the calm, unflappable demeanor of someone who's seen every illness imaginable and knows that most are beyond his power to cure. He takes one look at you and gestures to an empty cot. There are maybe 8 cots in the infirmary, 4 occupied by monks in various states of illness. One man is coughing continuously, a horrible wet sound that makes your own chest hurt in sympathy. Another lies perfectly still, his face pale and sweaty, eyes closed. A third sits propped against the wall, sipping something from a wooden cup. You collapse onto the cot, and Brother Clement immediately begins his examination. He presses his hand to your forehead, feeling the heat. He listens to your chest, ear pressed against your back, as you breathe deeply and cough. He looks at your tongue, checks your eyes, feels the glands in your neck. Then he signs, "Chest fever, common. Rest here. I'll bring medicine." The medicine arrives in a clay cup, a brownish liquid that smells like herbs and bitterness. You drink it without question, trusting that Brother Clement knows what he's doing. It tastes terrible, like boiled bark mixed with honey to barely mask the awfulness, but you get it down. He also brings you a poultice, a warm paste made from mustard seed and something else you don't recognize, and spreads it across your chest, covering it with a cloth. The heat from the poultice feels good at first, then starts to burn slightly, your skin turning red beneath the cloth. But Brother Clement assures you with signs that this is good. This is drawing out the illness. The infirmary becomes your world for the next week. You lie in your cot, drifting in and out of feverish sleep, and the days blur together. Brother Clement checks on you regularly, bringing more medicine, more poultices, bowls of thin broth that you sip slowly because chewing feels like too much effort. The warmth of the room is both blessing and curse. It's comforting, but it also makes you sweat through your habit, leaving you damp and uncomfortable. The other patients become familiar. The man coughing constantly is Brother Aldrich, an older monk who's been sick for weeks. His cough is deep and painful, and sometimes you see blood on the cloth he holds to his mouth. Brother Clement tends to him with extra care, but you can see in his eyes that he doesn't expect Aldrich to recover. The man lying still is Brother Penda, who has a fever that won't break. Brother Clement applies cold cloths to his forehead, forces him to drink water and medicine, but Penda barely responds. He's somewhere else, trapped in fever dreams you can't reach. The third man, the one sitting up, is Brother Wulfric. He broke his leg falling on ice while carrying firewood, and the bone didn't set properly. His leg is splinted and bound, and he can't walk, but he's alert and relatively healthy otherwise. He becomes your companion in sickness, the one person you can actually communicate with using signs. He tells you, through gestures and mouthed words, that he's been here for 3 weeks, that the boredom is worse than the pain, that he misses the work and the routine. Brother Clement is a healer trained in the traditional methods passed down through generations of monks. He doesn't have medical school or textbooks or any kind of formal training beyond what older infirmarians taught him. But he has experience, observation, and a collection of remedies that sometimes work and sometimes don't. He treats fevers with willow bark tea, which tastes bitter but does seem to reduce the heat in your body. He treats coughs with horehound and honey, a sticky syrup that coats your throat and makes breathing slightly easier. He treats infections with poultices of bread, mold, or crushed garlic, both of which smelled terrible, but occasionally prevent wounds from festering. For serious cases, he resorts to bloodletting. You watch him do this to Brother Penda, carefully opening a vein in the arm and allowing blood to flow into a bowl. The theory, Brother Clement explains through signs, is that illness is caused by an imbalance of humors in the body, and removing blood helps restore balance. You're skeptical, and you notice that Penda looks weaker after the procedure, not stronger. But this is medieval medicine. It's based on centuries of tradition, not science, and Brother Clement believes in it completely. He also uses prayers, not instead of medicine, but alongside it. He prays over each patient, asking for God's mercy, for healing, for strength. He anoints the seriously ill with blessed oil, murmuring Latin words you don't understand, but that carry weight and solemnity. When Brother Aldrich finally dies, coughing blood until his last breath, Brother Clement is there, holding his hand, praying him into death with the same gentle calm he showed in life. Aldrich's death happens at night. You wake to the sound of his final, rattling breaths, and then silence. Brother Clement is already there, having sensed somehow that the end was near. He closes Aldrich's eyes, folds his hands across his chest, and signs the cross over his body. Then he goes to the chapel to inform the abbot. By morning, Aldrich's body has been washed, wrapped in clean cloth, and laid in the chapel for prayers before burial. His cot is stripped, scrubbed, and prepared for the next sick monk. The infirmary, like the monastery itself, doesn't pause for death. You recover slowly. The fever breaks after 4 days, leaving you weak and shaky, but clear-headed. The cough persists for another week, gradually becoming less frequent, less painful. Brother Clement monitors your progress, gradually reducing the medicine, eventually allowing you to sit up, then to walk around the infirmary, then finally to leave. On your last day, he gives you a small cloth bag filled with dried herbs horehound. You recognize the smell signs. If the cough returns, make tea. Don't wait until you're dying to come back. You nod, grateful, and return to the dormitory. It feels colder than you remember, and you realize that's because it is. The infirmary's warmth was an anomaly, a brief respite. Now you're back to the reality of frozen stone and thin blankets. But you're alive. You survived. And somehow that matters more than the discomfort. The infirmary taught you several things. First, that the body is fragile, especially in winter, especially under these conditions. Second, that healing is as much about care and rest as it is about medicine. Brother Clement's remedies might or might not have cured you, but his presence, his attention, his refusal to give up, those things mattered. Third, that death is close, always, and the only thing separating you from Brother Aldrich's fate is luck and God's will. In whatever proportion applies. You also learned about the monastery's approach to illness. There's no panic, no hysteria, no desperate attempts to save everyone at any cost. There's acceptance. Some people get sick, some recover, some don't. Brother Clement does what he can with the tools and knowledge he has, and beyond that, it's in God's hands. This fatalism would seem cruel in the modern world, but here it's practical. You can't stop disease. You can't prevent death. You can only treat symptoms, offer comfort, and pray. If this is helping you relax or sleep, please share it with someone who loves history. It helps the channel grow. Because these stories, these lives, lived in cold stone buildings with inadequate medicine and constant hardship, they matter. They show us what survival looked like before modern medicine, before antibiotics, before any of the things we take for granted. The infirmary also reveals the monastery's hierarchy of care. The elderly get more attention, more medicine, more time by the fire. They've earned it through decades of service. The young and strong are expected to recover on their own or not. Resources are limited, and they're allocated based on age, position, and perceived value to the community. It's not cruel, exactly, just practical. An old monk who's spent 40 years copying manuscripts deserves care. A young novice who's been here 2 months. He's replaceable. Brother Penda, the fevered monk, eventually recovers, though it takes 3 weeks. His fever breaks, his strength returns, and one morning you see him walking slowly through the cloister, leaning on a staff, his face still pale but alive. Brother Clement tells you later, through signs, that he nearly died twice. That there were nights when his breathing was so shallow it barely registered, but something in him refused to quit. Survival, you learn, is partly medicine, partly care, partly luck, and partly sheer stubbornness. The herbs Brother Clement uses come from the monastery's own garden, a plot of land near the kitchen where medicinal plants are grown during the warmer months and harvested before winter. Yarrow for wounds and bleeding, sage for sore throats, thyme for chest complaints, mint for digestion, chamomile for calming. Each plant has its use, its preparation, its dosage. Brother Clement knows them all. Knows when to use roots versus leaves, when to make tea versus poultice, when to combine herbs, and when to use them alone. This knowledge was passed to him by his predecessor, who learned from his predecessor, a chain of healing wisdom stretching back generations. But some illnesses are beyond herbs. Consumption, the wasting disease, kills slowly and inevitably. Frostbite can't be cured, only managed, and if it progresses too far, amputation is the only option. The monastery has a saw for this purpose, kept clean and sharp in the infirmary, and Brother Clement has used it. You don't ask how many times. You don't want to know. Winter diseases are the worst. The cold weakens everyone's bodies, making them susceptible to infections that wouldn't take hold in summer. Pneumonia kills more monks than any other single cause. Chest fevers, like the one you had, turn deadly if they spread deep into the lungs. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, sometimes entire limbs. The cold is not just uncomfortable, it's actively dangerous, a constant threat that wears down even the strongest bodies over months of exposure. Brother Clement himself looks exhausted by midwinter. He sleeps in the infirmary, available at all hours to tend to patients, and the constant care takes its toll. His eyes are shadowed, his movements are slower, but he never complains. He never asks for help beyond what the rule provides. This is his calling, his service to God and to the community. He accepted it years ago, and he'll continue until he's the one lying in a cot, waiting for another infirmarian to tend to him. The monastery's approach to health is holistic, though they wouldn't use that word. Body, mind, and spirit are all connected. If your spirit is strong, your body can endure more. If your mind is disciplined, illness is easier to bear. Brother Clement treats the whole person, not just symptoms. He prays with you, talks to you through signs about your fears and worries, makes sure you feel seen and cared for, not just diagnosed and medicated. There's also a practical element to the infirmary's existence. Sick monks can't work, can't pray properly, can't fulfill their duties. Getting them healthy as quickly as possible serves the monastery's interests. But beyond practicality, there's genuine compassion. The rule of Saint Benedict specifically commands care for the sick, calling it one of the most important duties. Care of the sick must rank above and before all else, Benedict wrote. And the monastery follows this, allocating resources, warmth, attention to those who need it most. You watch Brother Clement work one afternoon, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, measuring careful portions into cloth bags, labeling them with symbols you don't understand. His hands are steady despite his exhaustion. His face is focused. This is skilled work, requiring knowledge, experience, judgment. He's not just mixing plants. He's crafting medicine, tailoring treatments to specific people and specific illnesses, using tools and techniques refined over centuries. By the time you leave the infirmary for good, you have a new appreciation for Brother Clement and all the infirmarians who came before him. They're not doctors in any modern sense. They can't cure most diseases, can't perform surgery beyond basic amputations, can't prevent epidemics, but they can offer comfort, relief, hope. They can sit with the dying and make sure they're not alone. They can treat the treatable and pray for the rest. In a world without antibiotics or modern medicine, that's everything. You return to the scriptorium the next day, still weak but functional, and Brother Anselm nods in approval. You pick up your quill, dip it in ink, and begin copying where you left off. The work is harder than before. Your hands shake slightly. Your lungs still ache when you breathe deeply. Your body reminds you constantly that you were sick, that you nearly weren't here. But you are here. You survived, and that night, lying in your cot in the freezing dormitory, you say a silent prayer for Brother Aldrich, who didn't survive, and for Brother Clement, who tends the sick while ignoring his own exhaustion. You pull your thin blanket tighter and close your eyes, grateful for the breath in your lungs, the beat of your heart, the stubborn persistence of life in the face of winter's constant assault. Moments of warmth, community, and small Joycier kneeling in the chapel, breath misting, toes numb, and Brother Godric catches your eye and smiles, and suddenly Inexplicably, you feel warm. Warmth in the monastery isn't always physical. Sometimes it's a glance, a touch, a moment of connection that reminds you you're not alone. These moments are rare, precious, and they sustain you in ways that fire and food never could. Because the cold can freeze your body, but loneliness freezes your soul. And in a place defined by silence and suffering, the small gestures of human kindness become everything. Brother Godric has become your unexpected anchor. You didn't seek out his friendship. Friendships aren't really encouraged here. Particular attachments are considered distractions from devotion to God, but somehow it happened anyway. He's the one who moved his heated stone to your desk in the scriptorium. He's the one who caught your eye during that endless matins and made you feel less alone. He's the one who, despite the silence rule, finds ways to communicate care, a hand on your shoulder when you're struggling, a nod of encouragement when you complete, a shared look of commiseration when the pottage is particularly bad. You learn his story in fragments, pieced together from signed conversations during rare permitted speech times, and from things other monks sign about him. He came to the monastery 5 years ago after his entire family died in a fire. He was 17. He had nowhere else to go. The monastery took him in, gave him purpose, structure, a reason to keep living. He took his vows 2 years ago, and by all accounts, he's devout, disciplined, everything a monk should be. But he's also human, warm in a way that defies the cold around him. And his humanity makes this place bearable. The chapter meetings are where speech is permitted, where the community gathers to discuss practical matters and hear the abbot's instructions. These happen once a week, and they're the only time you hear your own voice for extended periods. The first time you speak after weeks of silence, your voice sounds strange, rusty, too loud in your own ears. You say your name when asked, report on your progress in the scriptorium, and sit down quickly, overwhelmed by the sound of your own words. But the chapter meetings also reveal the community's dynamics. You see who speaks with confidence and who hesitates. You learn that Brother Anselm, despite his sternness in the scriptorium, has a dry sense of humor that occasionally surfaces. You discover that the abbot is more accessible than you thought, willing to hear concerns and make adjustments when reasonable. You realize that beneath the silence and the discipline, there's a functioning society here. A group of men trying to live together under difficult circumstances, and mostly succeeding. The feast days are the clearest expressions of community warmth. Christmas is the pinnacle, a week of slightly relaxed rules and marginally better food. But there are others scattered through winter. St. Benedict's feast day, Epiphany, the purification of Mary. On these days, the monastery transforms. The chapel is lit with extra candles, making it less a dark cave and more a glowing sanctuary. The singing is more elaborate, with harmonies and descants that transform the usual plain chant into something beautiful. The meals are better and the portions are larger, but more than the food or the candles, it's the atmosphere that changes. The abbot permits conversation during the feast day meal, and the refectory fills with voices, laughter even, sounds you've almost forgotten existed. Men talk about their lives before the monastery, about their families, about memories of other Christmases. Brother Cuthbert tells a story about a particularly stubborn ox he once owned, and the whole room laughs. Brother Wulfstan recovered from his broken leg, shares a song from his homeland, and others join in, their voices rough but joyful. You sit there, listening, and feel something unfamiliar: happiness, not contentment, not satisfaction, not the grim pride of surviving another day, but actual happiness, the kind that makes your chest feel light and your face hurt from smiling. You look around the refectory and see the same feeling reflected in other faces. These men, who spend most of their time cold, hungry, and silent, are allowing themselves to be joyful. And it's beautiful. Brother Godric is sitting across from you, and during a lull in conversation, he catches your eye and signs. This is why we endure, and you understand. The feast days aren't rewards for surviving winter. They're reminders of what you're surviving for: community, connection, the knowledge that you're not alone in this, that these men, with their different backgrounds and personalities and struggles, are your brothers in a way that goes beyond blood. The work assignments also create unexpected bonds. You're paired with Brother Edmund for a week of kitchen duty, and despite his earlier disaster with the spilled ink, he turns out to be competent and funny. He has a way of making drudgery entertaining, turning the endless chopping of turnips into a kind of meditation, or at least making you laugh about it through creative hand signs. When he accidentally burns himself on the cauldron, you're the one who rushes to Brother Clement for salve, and when you return, Edmund signs, "Thank you, friend, friend." The word carries weight here, weight and warmth. You also spend time with Brother Leofric at the fish pond, and his quiet competence and obvious love for his work is calming. He doesn't talk much, even when talking is permitted, but he teaches through demonstration, showing you how to cast nets, how to judge weather, how to move quietly so as not to startle the fish. One afternoon, you catch a particularly large pike, and Leofric's face lights up with genuine delight. He signs, "Beautiful fish, well done," and you feel proud in a way that has nothing to do with ego and everything to do with shared accomplishment. The dormitory, despite being the coldest and most uncomfortable space, also becomes a place of subtle warmth. You learn everyone's patterns, their quirks, their struggles. Brother Ulrich always sleeps on his back. Brother Edmund kicks in his sleep. Brother Wulfric snores. And slowly, these irritations become familiar, even comforting. When Wulfric's snoring stops one night, you actually wake up alarmed, until you hear him shift and resume his usual noise. The snoring means he's alive, means everyone's still here, still surviving together. The small acts of care multiply as winter deepens. Someone leaves an extra blanket on your cot one night, anonymously. You never find out who, but you're grateful. Another time, you find your worn sandals have been repaired, the straps reinforced, the soles patched. Brother Oswald, you discover later, did it during his free hour, sacrificing his own rest to help you. You return the favor by helping him carry firewood when his arthritis is particularly bad, and he nods in acknowledgement. A whole conversation in that single gesture. What historical period would you want to live in for a year? Let me know below. Because I'll tell you this, medieval monastery life isn't what I'd choose. But there's something profound about a community that strips away everything superficial and focuses on pure survival and connection. The music is another source of warmth. The daily prayers are sung, not spoken, and while the singing is disciplined and structured, there's beauty in it. You learn the chants gradually. your voice blending with the others, becoming part of something larger than yourself. There are moments in the chapel, usually during Vespers, when the light is failing and the candles are lit, when the harmonies align perfectly and the sound fills the space with something that feels transcendent. In those moments, you forget the cold. You forget your hunger. You forget everything except the music and the shared act of creating it. Brother Columba, the elderly monk with the beautiful handwriting, occasionally gives informal calligraphy lessons during the permitted speech times. He gathers interested novices in the scriptorium and demonstrates techniques, how to hold the quill at different angles for different effects, how to mix inks for richer colors, how to plan a page layout for maximum visual impact. He's patient, encouraging, and watching him work is like watching poetry written in real time. He tells you once, his voice quiet and slightly shaky with age, "This work outlasts us." That gives it meaning. The animals provide unexpected comfort too. The monastery's cat, a scruffy orange tom named Rufus, has the run of the place and seems to understand that his job is pest control and morale support in equal measure. He appears in the scriptorium sometimes, jumping onto desks, demanding attention, forcing stern monks to pause and scratch his ears. Brother Anselm pretends to be annoyed, but you've seen him slip Rufus scraps from the kitchen. The cat is warm, soft, alive, and petting him reminds you of life beyond survival, of simple pleasures that still exist even here. The dogs that guard the monastery's sheep are similarly beloved. They're working animals, not pets, but they're treated with care and respect. You help Brother Leofric feed them once, and the way they wag their tails, the way their whole bodies wiggle with excitement over a bowl of scraps, it's so purely joyful that you can't help but smile. One of the dogs, a shaggy gray beast named Wolf, follows you around for the rest of the day, and you let him, grateful for the company. The moments of permitted laughter are rare but precious. During a work session in the cloister, Brother Edmund slips on ice and lands flat on his back, completely unhurt, but looking so surprised that everyone nearby laughs. Even Brother Thomas, usually stern, cracks a smile. Edmund laughs, too, signing from his position on the ground. "I'm fine. My dignity isn't." The shared laughter breaks the tension, reminds everyone that they're allowed to find humor even in hardship. Brother Godric tells you during a chapter meeting about a tradition the older monks have on the coldest night of winter. They gather in the calefactory after Compline and tell stories. Not religious stories, not necessarily, just stories about their lives, their families, things they remember from before the monastery. It's technically against the rule, this gathering for non-essential purposes. But the abbot allows it because he understands that men need more than prayer and work to survive winter. They need stories. They need connection. You're invited to this gathering one February night when the wind is howling so fiercely that the monastery walls seem to shake. You follow Brother Godric to the calefactory, where maybe 20 monks have gathered, sitting on the floor in a circle around the fire. The abbot is there, which surprises you, sitting cross-legged like everyone else. Brother Thomas is there, Brother Anselm, Brother Clement, even Brother Columba, who rarely leaves the scriptorium. The stories begin. Brother Cuthbert talks about his childhood on a farm, about a cow that learned to open gates and would lead the entire herd on escapes through the village. Brother Wolfstan talks about the sea, about growing up in a fishing village, about storms and catches, and the time he nearly drowned. Brother Anselm, shockingly, talks about a woman he loved before he came to the monastery, a woman who died giving birth, and how that loss brought him here. His voice cracks slightly when he talks about her, and no one looks away. The vulnerability is honored, not pitied. When it's your turn, you talk about your family, about your mother's kitchen, about your sister's laugh, about the day you left, the way your father gripped your shoulder and said nothing because there was nothing to say. You talk about missing them, about wondering if you made the right choice, about the fear and doubt that still creep in during the darkest hours. And when you finish, Brother Godric reaches over and squeezes your shoulder, and you know you've been heard. Really heard. The gathering lasts maybe 2 hours, and when it ends, everyone returns to the dormitory in silence, the rule reasserting itself. But something has shifted. You're not just surviving alongside these men anymore. You're connected to them. You know their stories. You've shared yours. The cold is still there, brutal and unrelenting, but it feels less overwhelming now, because you're not facing it alone. That night, lying in your cot, real warmth isn't just temperature. It's not just fire and food and shelter. It's human connection. It's being seen and known and cared for. It's the small gestures that say, I'm here, you're here, we're doing this together. The monastery, with all its hardships and deprivations, has taught you that. And lying there in the darkness, listening to the breathing of the other monks, you feel something you didn't expect to find here. Gratitude, not for the cold or the hunger or the suffering, but for the men who endure it with you, your brothers, your community, your family, in the truest sense of the word. Spring's promise and reflection. The winter didn't break you, it shaped you. And as the first green shoots push through the abbey garden soil, you realize survival was never the point. Transformation was. Spring arrives incrementally, so slowly you almost don't notice at first. The darkness lifts by degrees. One morning, you walk to Lauds and realize the sky is lightening. Not much, but enough to see outlines of buildings without squinting. The next week, the sun actually rises before prime. A weak pale disk that provides little warmth, but incredible psychological relief. Light, real light. After months of darkness, even this one winter spring sun feels like a miracle. The cold persists, of course. March is brutal, possibly worse than January, because by now your body is exhausted from months of fighting the freeze. But the quality of cold changes. It's sharper, cleaner, less oppressive. The damp, bone-deep chill of deep winter gives way to a crisp cold that at least feels like it might end someday. You wake one morning to find that the frost on the dormitory windows has a different pattern, more delicate, less thick. Small signs. But you've learned to read small signs. The snow begins to melt in earnest around mid-March. You watch from the cloister as the white drifts shrink day by day, revealing brown grass, bare earth, the bones of the garden that's been buried since November. Water drips from the eaves constantly, a sound you'd almost forgotten, and small streams form in the courtyard, running toward the drains. The world is emerging, like something being born, slow and messy and beautiful. The monastery's rhythm shifts with the season. Work that was impossible in deep winter becomes urgent now. Roofs need repair where ice has damaged them. Fences need mending. The garden needs preparing for spring planting. You're assigned to work outside for the first time in months, and the experience is startling. The air, while cold, doesn't hurt to breathe. The sun, weak as it is, warms your face. Your body remembers how to move without constant shivering. You're still wearing your full habit, cloak and hood, but you're not quite as bundled. Progress. Brother Leofric takes you to the fish pond one afternoon, and the ice is finally breaking up. Large plates of it floating and bumping against each other with hollow sounds. The fish are visible beneath, sluggish but alive, and Leofric signs with genuine relief they survived. Not all of them, you learn later. Some died under the ice, their bodies to be removed and given to the pigs. But most survived, which means protein for the months ahead. Which means the monastery's careful planning worked. The birds return. You notice this one morning during prime, hearing a sound you haven't heard in months. Birdsong. Just a single bird at first, probably a robin, singing from somewhere outside the chapel. The sound is so unexpected that several monks glance toward the windows, breaking their focus on prayers. Brother Thomas shoots them a stern look, but even he looks pleased. Birds mean spring. Spring means survival. The monastery has made it through another winter. The food begins to improve incrementally. The pottage gets slightly less gray as Brother Oswald starts using the first spring herbs. Wild garlic and early greens foraged from the edges of the monastery grounds. The bread tastes the same, but the portions get marginally larger as the abbot calculates that the stores will last until the first harvests. You're still hungry, always hungry, but it's a different kind of hunger now. Not the desperate, gnawing hunger of deep winter, but an anticipatory hunger. Food is coming. Growth is coming. Abundance, relative abundance at least, is coming. The work in the garden is hard but satisfying. You help Brother Alred, an elderly monk who's been tending this plot for 40 years, prepare the soil. The earth is still cold, still hard, but when you break through the surface, the soil beneath is rich and dark and alive. Brother Alred shows you how to test the soil, crumbling it in his gnarled fingers, nodding with satisfaction. Good earth, he signs. God provides. You help him mark out rows, stretch string lines for straight planting. Begin the careful work of turning over soil that's been frozen for months. Other monks work on other tasks. Brother Cuthbert is in the forest, assessing which trees can be harvested for next winter's firewood. The work is never done, never complete. You survive one winter by preparing for the next. Brother Wolfstan, fully recovered from his broken leg, is repairing the chicken coop that partially collapsed under snow. Wait. Brother Edmund is patching holes in the refectory roof. Everyone is moving, working, contributing to the monastery's continued survival. The scriptorium work continues, of course. Manuscripts don't stop needing copying just because the weather improves. But now there's actual sunlight streaming through the windows, and the difference is profound. You can see the parchment clearly without straining. Your letters are cleaner, more precise. Your hands, while still cold, are functional without the constant fight against numbness. Brother Anselm has even opened some of the windows, letting in fresh air that displaces the smoke-stale atmosphere. You breathe deeply and taste spring. The psalter you've been working on is nearly complete. Months of labor, hundreds of pages, thousands of letters, all coming together into a finished manuscript. Brother Anselm shows you the final pages one afternoon, the ones with the elaborate illuminations, Christ in majesty, surrounded by angels, rendered in gold and blue and red, so vibrant they seem to glow. This is what you've been working toward. This is the purpose of all those frozen mornings, all those cramped fingers, all that suffering, beauty, knowledge, preservation, something that will outlast all of you. You think about what you've learned during this winter, not just practical skills like calligraphy or how to survive cold or which herbs treat which illnesses, but deeper lessons. You've learned that you're stronger than you thought, that your body can endure extraordinary hardship if your mind is disciplined. You've learned that community isn't just people living near each other, but people actively choosing to support each other through suffering. You've learned that silence isn't empty, that it's full of observation, reflection, presence. You've learned that faith, whatever that means to you, isn't about certainty or comfort, but about showing up day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You've also learned about yourself. You came here thinking you were seeking God, and maybe you were, but what you found was simpler and more complex. You found what you're capable of. You found your limits and then pushed past them. You found that you can live without things you thought were essential: warmth, privacy, abundant food, constant stimulation. You found that survival strips away everything superficial and leaves only what's essential. And what's essential, you discovered, is smaller and larger than you imagined. Food, warmth, work, community, purpose. These things, in their most basic forms, are enough. Thanks for journeying through this medieval winter with me. If you enjoyed this, check out the Viking Winter Survival video next, or let me know what historical deep dive you'd like next. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one. The final vows ceremony is scheduled for Easter, and several novices who've completed their year of trial will take permanent vows then. You watch them prepare, their faces a mix of certainty and fear, and you wonder if you'll do the same next year. Will you stay? Can you endure another winter like this one? The answer isn't clear yet, but you have time. The rule requires a full year before final vows, and you've barely finished your first winter. There's spring to get through, summer, autumn, and then another winter. And then you'll decide. Brother Godric finds you in the cloister one afternoon, watching the early spring rain fall on the garden. The water is clearing away the last traces of snow, washing the earth clean. He stands beside you in comfortable silence for a while, then signs, "You survived." You nod, "We survived." He smiles, that gentle smile that's become familiar, and signs, "You should be proud." Pride is complicated here. It's a sin if it's about ego, about thinking you're better than others. But pride in survival, in endurance, in doing hard things well, that's allowed, maybe even encouraged. You sign back, "I couldn't have done it alone." "No one can," Godric signs. That's the point. You stand there together, watching the rain, and you realize that this moment, this simple moment of standing beside someone who understands what you've been through, is what you'll remember from this winter. Not the coldest night or the hungriest day or the most painful moment, but this connection, presence, the knowledge that you're not alone. The Easter feast is magnificent by monastery standards. Roasted lamb, a gift from a benefactor. Fresh bread, made with white flour, soft and light. Honey cakes, cheese ale that hasn't gone sour. And vegetables, actual green vegetables, the first of the spring harvest. Lettuce, green onions. The taste of something fresh and alive after months of preserved and dried food is almost overwhelming. You eat slowly, savoring every bite, and around you, other monks do the same. This is celebration. This is renewal. This is the promise that winter always ends, that spring always comes, that survival is possible. The abbot speaks during the feast. One of the rare times he addresses the community at length. He thanks everyone for their endurance, their discipline, their faith. He acknowledges the monks who died during winter, speaking their names aloud. Brother Aldrich, Brother Alred, Brother Osric. He reminds everyone that death is part of life, that the monastery continues even as individuals pass. And then he looks specifically at the novices and says something that lodges in your chest. You've proven yourselves, not by being perfect, but by not quitting. That's what monastic life requires, not perfection, persistence. The words resonate. You haven't been perfect. You've made mistakes in the scriptorium. You've stolen extra bread when you thought no one was looking. You've complained, internally at least, about the cold and the hunger and the endless prayers. You've doubted. You've struggled, but you haven't quit. And apparently that's enough. The ceremony for final vows happens in the chapel after the feast. 3 novices, including Brother Edmund, kneel before the abbot and speak their vows aloud. Poverty, chastity, obedience, stability. The same vows every Benedictine monk takes, promises to live under this rule, in this place, for the rest of their lives. You watch Edmund's face as he speaks, and you see certainty there. He's sure. This is his path. This is his home. You wonder if you'll feel that certainty next year when it's your turn. Right now, you feel ... complicated. You're grateful for what you've learned, for the community you've found, for the person you're becoming. But you're also aware of what you've given up, what you've lost, your old life, your family, the possibility of a different future. The monastery demands everything, and you're not sure yet if you're willing to give it, but you have time. Spring is here. Summer is coming. You have months to work in the garden, to copy manuscripts in actual sunlight, to continue learning and growing and figuring out who you are. The winter has taught you that you can survive hardship. Now spring will teach you something else. How to thrive. How to find joy even in a life stripped of comfort. How to see beauty in simple things. How to be grateful for what you have instead of mourning what you've lost. You walk out of the chapel after the ceremony and into the spring evening. The air is cool but not cold. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Birds are singing their evening songs. The monastery bells ring for Compline, and you turn to walk toward the chapel. Your steps automatic now, the rhythm ingrained. But you pause for just a moment, looking up at the sky, at the light, at the evidence that winter has ended, and you smile. Not because you're warm or full or comfortable. You're still none of those things. But because you made it. You survived a medieval winter in a stone monastery without central heating or adequate food, or any of the modern comforts you took for granted. You survived through discipline, community, faith, and sheer stubbornness. And in surviving, you've become someone different, someone stronger, someone who knows what really matters. The bells continue ringing, and you turn and walk toward the chapel, your shadow stretching long behind you in the golden light. Tomorrow you'll wake at matins. You'll pray in the cold chapel. You'll work in the scriptorium or the garden. You'll eat pottage and bread. You'll struggle and persist and slowly, incrementally, continue becoming whatever it is you're meant to be. The winter didn't break you. It shaped you. And as you step into the chapel, into the familiar smell of stone and candles and incense, you realize something profound. You're grateful, not for the suffering itself, but for what it taught you, that you're capable of more than you believed, that community can sustain you through anything, that warmth isn't just temperature, that survival is a kind of victory, that life, even hard life, even life stripped to its essentials, is worth living. The monks begin to sing Compline, the final prayers of the day, and you join your voice to theirs. The sound fills the chapel, pushing back the gathering darkness, and you feel it again, that sense of being part of something larger than yourself, something that's survived for centuries and will continue long after you're gone, something worth preserving, worth enduring for, worth dedicating your life to, maybe. The prayers end. The candles are extinguished. You file out into the darkness and across the cloister to the dormitory. Your cot is waiting, still hard, still cold, still uncomfortable, but it's familiar now. It's yours. You lie down, pull your thin blanket over yourself, and close your eyes. Outside, spring continues its slow work of renewal. Inside, you rest. You survived. And tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again. Because that's what you do here. You show up. You persist. You endure. And in enduring, you become something more than you were. Something forged in cold and discipline and silence and community. Something that's learned that survival isn't about comfort. It's about meaning, purpose, connection, the knowledge that you're not alone, even in the darkest, coldest, hardest moments, and that, you realize, as sleep finally takes you, is enough, more than enough. It's everything.